News Talk Sports. Nooga Radio. Now, the smartest guy with a bow tie in Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Tulis.
I hope you had an enjoyable 4th of July and that you are either back at work or on your way back to the routines of Wednesday here. David Tulis, thank you for giving us a couple of minutes of your time. The American colonists had it very, very good under the British. This is a point made by one of my favorite writers, Gary North, in another of his revisionist pieces that explains why he does not or did not celebrate the 4th of July yesterday, as did many others in routine fashion. Many people, I think, celebrating the 4th unthinkingly, and it really is not anything about the meaning of the move for independence from the British or the political structures that were built and created at that time, and really anything about the value of the American Republic, which of course is now lost. We've now lost it. The Constitution being largely a dead letter, except of course for the individual belligerent claimant in person, the man who stands on his rights. Right, the man who stands on his rights is the one who will be vindicated, even though he comes under duress in our day, in which police officers and sheriff's deputies and regulators and tax officials clearly and blatantly reject constitutional protections and view the Constitution simply as an annoyance. And here now we have a person saying he's got constitutional rights and blah, blah, blah. And this person we need to call the supervisor and we need to call for backup. That's that someone creates in the hearts of officials and bean counters when there is a confrontation. So the Constitution lives for them, but for everybody else and for the practical operation of the national government, and in many ways the state government, there is not a Constitution. It is simply a byword, as the Israelites were when they went into captivity. They were a byword, and they were of no significance. They were just another servile population, part of an imperial depopulation move among in the hinterlands, bringing them to Babylon or Assyria. And a byword is what the Constitution is. And I think it's important to just consider briefly the economics of the time of the founding and realize that today things are much, much worse, dozens of times worse, maybe hundreds of times worse than the grievances felt by the colonists. The tax rate in the Americas at that time was 1%. What is the tax rate here? Well, it's many times that. For some people, it's 15, 20, 30%. If you're a wealthy investor, owning property in Chattanooga, you pay a federal take. If you run a factory downtown, you pay 40% or so of your gross receipts to various government entities. You pay that on your real estate. And at every turn, there is the main expense, and that is the government itself. There's a writer named Alvin Rabushka, and in 2008, he published a book called Taxation in Colonial America by Princeton University Press. And he points out there that there were 2 million white colonists in America, in the colonies, and they paid about 1% of their annual of their receipts on to Great Britain. That's about 8.5 million residents, or 1/25th in per capita terms, not taking into account the higher average income and consumption in the colonies. And then on the eve of the Revolution, the British tax burdens among domestics, right, in the British Isles, were 10 times more than they were in the colonies. And Gary North suggests that the colonies at that time were the freest place on earth, and he supposes that they were second to the Swiss Confederation. And so he says that in 1775, the Americas were the freest society on earth under the British. And when independence came, when the Americans began to set their own course and to pursue their own destiny, taxes were 3 times higher. under Washington. Historians have written that taxes in the new American nation rose and remained considerably higher, perhaps 3 times higher than they were under British rule. More money was required for national defense than previously needed to defend the frontier from Indians and the French, and the new government had other expenses as well. And of course, the experiment was early on in paper money, and that is a monetary inflation which in 1777 reached 480%. Pork rose at the beginning of the issuance of the continental currency. Pork rose from 4 cents to 8 cents a pound. Beef soared from about 4 cents to 100 cents a pound. By 1777, commodity prices were 480% above the pre-war average. And the Americans tried price controls, draconian punishments on those who set a free market price or accepted free market prices. And of course, whenever you have price controls, the real market makes the scarcity total. The free market makes the things sought by, let's say, by the army absolutely impossible to find. The prices of uncontrolled imported goods went sky high. He says it was almost impossible to buy any of the domestic commodities needed for the army. And the controls, well, of course, they're arbitrary, as they often are. Farmers refused to sell their goods at the prescribed prices, and few would take the paper continental. And in large families, some to feed and clothe their family members sold farm products stealthily to the British in return for gold. It was the only way they could buy the necessities of life was with gold. And Valley Forge was a disaster in the making because of the continental currency. And George Washington, in a letter to Congress, to the President of Congress, he says that notwithstanding it is a standing order and often repeated that the troops shall always have 2 days' provisions by them, that they might be ready at any sudden call, yet an opportunity has scarcely ever offered of taking an advantage of the enemy that has not been totally obstructed or greatly impeded on this account. Okay, now he's going to tell you what the account is. We have no less than 2,898 men now in camp unfit for duty. They're barefoot and they're naked. I'm now convinced beyond all doubt that unless some great and capital change suddenly takes place, this army must inevitably be reduced to one or other of these 3 things: starve, dissolve, or disperse, to obtain sustenance in the best manner that they can. So the price controls were repealed. The army could buy food again, but you had a hyperinflation, right? We have the prospect of a hyperinflation, or the deep state, the federal establishment probably would favor a slow burn that would just keep things on a status quo as long as they can. Nor quotes Engels, the Marxist scholar, as in his book, an 1872 book called On Authority. And in that volume, he criticizes anarchists, and he talks about the price of revolution. We know, what is revolution? In a revolution, he says, it is certainly the most authoritarian thing there is. It is the act whereby one part of the population imposes its will upon the other part by means of rifles, bayonets, and cannon. Authoritarian means, if such there be at all. And if the victorious party does not want to have fought in vain, it must maintain this rule by means of the terror which its arms inspire in the reactionists. And so because of that, because of the revolution being a violent act, internally, 48,000 Americans fled to Canada, refusing to obey the congressional system. And though the Federalist Papers are a glowing description of our built-in limitations of national government in the United States, the Federalist Papers prove wrong, and the Anti-Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalists, have proven right. They warned against what we have today. But of course, now the 4th of July celebration, whether it's at fireworks displays at Lakeside or in a neighborhood, or just people firing off a few firecrackers in the backyard, the thing to celebrate, which is independence, may, in some respect, we might say, is good because we favor decentralization, generally the marketplace generally favors small over big. And the American experiment broke off a major limb of the English Empire. So small is better than big. But look what happened to us. We became what the British were at the time. The very evils that we complain of today about the British at that time, we are complained against, right? We are issuing those, whether it's troops quartering, dronings, occupations, carpet bombings. We have military pollution in Iraq so severe that it has created generations of deformed Iraqi people. You can see what some of them look like at Nooganomics.com. Just look up uranium. The search term is uranium depleted ammunition in Iraq. That is the legacy of the American imperial overreach, paid for by what? Paid for by taxation? No, paid for by inflation, effectively. And those adventures will not be paid for. They will not be paid for. We have done many things in this country. Here, David Tulis with you here at Nooga Radio. We've done many things in this country that are not paid for. And the people who most rely on government are those whom will be suffering the most. We have a prospect of more taxation and a prospect of inflation that will be, of course, the secret tax. Inflation is the hidden tax that we have the Federal Reserve System since 2008, the meltdown, in bringing this tax upon us through inflation. And there's inflation in many, many areas. And in equities, the price of, if you lost half your value in the meltdown, well, it's all been restored to you. As I was telling an agent investor the other day, it's all been restored to you, but that's inflation. That's not a real gain in the market, a real value of the increasing value of that company whose publicly traded shares you have bought on the secondary market. That's not a real value there. It's just inflation, demand being pushed by easy money and credit. We are here at 1240 AM, 92.7 FM, and 95.3 HD4 high definition. For David Tulis, your host here, we cover local economy and the free market. And there is another story that touches on this matter of those who rely on the state for their sustenance and for their security. They're going to be in for a disaster. One problem that we have with dependence on government is that people lose the muscle by which to create prosperity for themselves, by which to create their own meaning, right? They can't get work. They can't start jobs. They can't start businesses. Many of them are on disability. We have a huge disability population, which is a racket. And that racket makes people incapable of thinking about others. Well, the problem is when you become a dependent, whether you're getting a military stipend, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or you're getting a disability check or some other benefit, you lose the ability to think in terms of service to others. It's just what happens. And you start looking at that money coming in as your right? It belongs to you. You have a right to it. You have procedural rights that let you enforce that claim by appealing to the administration. If for some reason the benefit is cut or reduced, you can appeal. There's a way of thinking about the money coming into you that is yours. It's yours, and you're going to keep it, and no one's going to take it from you. And where that money comes from is not a concern of yours, right? It's yours. It's available to you, and you have that right. And so you don't think anymore in terms of serving other people. And the whole marketplace, the whole American genius, is based on that particular impulse, the impulse of seeing a benefit, seeing an opportunity to serve somebody with something that you have, right? Some knowledge that you have, a gadget that you have, software that you have, a means, a method, connections that you have. I'm not referring necessarily to political connections, but to connections that let you buy something cheaply and sell it at a profit to someone who needs it. People who sell, for example, at parades, right? You have a military parade, a 4th of July parade, and there are vendors who are hawking gadgets, they're hawking light rods, they're hawking flags, cold water bottles, and the like. Those are people who are simply seeing a benefit to you, right? They're there for you. and they're lugging their cooler around, and for $2 you can have a sports drink that costs that particular vendor 25 or 30 cents, right? If you bought by the case. So he's making a profit. You're glad to pay the $2. Is worth it to you. And so you have a little business, and things like that are a gift, right? They're a grace that you have, and you have it better, and you exercise it more fully if you're thinking about other people rather than just the money that you can generate. You can certainly think in terms of money, in terms of your profit first, and come up with ideas that work. But overall, in the larger body of people, I would say that there's more prosperity if the thought is about the customer and your service to the customer. In other words, a kind of a Christian perspective on service to others. Well, the muscle for looking out for others goes flat, it goes numb, it goes hard, it gets hard and not supple when people have easy retirement. Now, there are millions of people in this country who are government retirees. They're on the federal payroll for retirement. They are on state payrolls. They're on county payrolls. They have 401ks. Many of them have defined pension benefit plans. And there is a crisis in the making. There's a train wreck coming, and I'm holding up here for my viewer on YouTube the cover of the latest Money Changer newsletter. Train wreck coming, unfunded pension liabilities. That's also, you can see it here on Facebook in reversed letters. Of course, it's all reversed on Facebook, but on YouTube, where we are live, you can actually read it on your screen. Train wreck coming, unfunded pension liabilities, by a writer who's in the coin business named Patrick Heller, whose newsletter is called Liberty's Outlook. It's $159 a year, published monthly from Liberty Coin Service. And there is looking mostly just at in Michigan. There's the picture is writ across the country, but he mentions the Lansing government has $675 million in arrears on its pension, and the state itself, with all its obligations, is $55 billion in arrears on its pension plans. Now, Tennessee, I think, is different. It's a different story, and I'm not quite sure whether to apply this story to Tennessee. So it could be that if you're a Tennessee pensioner in the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System, you are not in danger. You're not in peril for this disaster ahead for dependence on federal and state retirement largesse. And but first, just briefly, Illinois, for example, has $15 billion in debt, unpaid bills, and the like. But its pension debt is get this, $126 billion pension debt in Illinois. And Moody's says, according to Patrick Heller, Moody's says that there are $1.8 trillion in underfunding in state pension plans across the country. Now, you say, well, that's fine. These are state workers who've been hitting me my whole business life. I've been paying state taxes, high state taxes. I've had run-ins with the state revenue department. I've been harassed. I've been hurt. I've been pinched in my finances. I've suffered badly financially because of state taxes. And here now we have state retirees, and they're going to be stiffed. Well, good. Let them be stiffed. Well, maybe I understand that impulse, but on the other hand, think of the personal problems that this cutback across the country, this loss of retirement income will cause. There are people who've counted on that money, and of course they've been spending big, living big, borrowing big all across the land. Americans have. And so they're going to be shorting their lenders, right? Their credit card lenders and other lenders who paid for their vacations and their big cars and their new F-150 truck every year and the like. Tennessee, though, is not quite in the same position. And this is a remarkable story. I checked the latest comprehensive annual financial report for TCRS, that is the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System. And here, in a nutshell, it's richer than the state itself. This is a retirement fund, a sovereign wealth liquid capital fund, investment fund that is worth more than the state itself. And you say, how is that possible? And are these retirees Tennessee retirees living high on the hog? Well, maybe they are. The total assets of this fund is $50.8 billion. Total liabilities are $7.5 billion. So there's a net value of TCRS, the Tennessee Retirement System, of about $43.3 billion. The net position of the state government is about $10 billion less. It's $33.9 billion as of June 30 last year. The total Tennessee debt is $213 million up to $2.4 billion. So Tennessee has some debt, but it's required to have a balanced budget every year. And there is this retirement system. Now, what is this retirement system? I have done some work following the lead of a national expert on this question. The man who first discovered CAFRs, CAFR. CAFR is the comprehensive annual financial report that is supposed to show the real operations of government. Now, budget years, stories in the press about budgets, budget fights, and so on, whether on state or county or city. Budget debates are for the boobs, okay, for the rubes, for common people. The real financial matters are not in the budget, but in the comprehensive annual report. And everyone has one. Chattanooga has one. The county of Hamilton has one, and so does the state. Now, and so does its retirement system. The retirement system that has a gloss of elected officials on the cover as the face of this investment fund, established in 1972 from 7 separate retirement systems for state employees, university workers, public school teachers, and employees of political subdivisions. They all took part and created this gigantic fund bigger than the state itself. So it doesn't look like this disaster is going to hit Tennessee, at least not for what I can tell right now. This is David Tulis, Nooga Radio.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240,